Live from New York City, it's the Gary Null Show. And now, your host, Gary Null.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null. Always a pleasure to be able to spend some time sharing how we can live a longer and healthier and happier life. Today, we begin with a study from Arizona State University. The study explores the effects of dietary choline, that's choline, deficiency on neurologic and system-wide health. Now, historically, going back to the 1970s, choline and inositol were considered very important. In fact, they were probably the most important part of the B complex, B1, B2, B6, pantothenic acid. These were also part of that, B12. But it was choline and inositol. And that was because of the work of a doctor up in Canada, an MD, PhD, who started the Orthomolecular Medical Society. He found that choline and inositol were very good for people who had mental conditions. And in any case, his name was Dr. Abram Hoffer, and I work with him an awful lot. Well, today, there's brand new information on choline. Now, by the way, choline is an essential nutrient produced in small amounts in the liver and found in foods, broccoli, beans, all types of beans, and in eggs and meat. It's vital for human health. A new study explores how deficiencies, when you don't have enough of dietary choline, adversely affects the body, and it may be a missing piece in the puzzle of Alzheimer's disease. It's estimated that more than 90% of Americans are now meeting the recommended daily intake of choline. The current research conducted in mice suggests that dietary choline deficiency can have profound negative effects on the heart, the liver, and other organs. Lack of choline is also linked to profound changes in your brain associated with Alzheimer's disease. These include pathologies implicated in the development of two classic hallmarks of illness: amyloid plaques, those are the white streaks in the brain, which aggregate in the intercellular spaces between neurons, and tau, that's TAU, tangles, which condense within the bodies of neurons. The new research, led by Arizona State University and published in the peer-reviewed journal Aging Cell, describes the pathologies in normal mice deprived of choline. So, one more thing that we can do to make sure that our brains are not prematurely aging and do not cause disease. Something as simple as a B complex. I suggest for most people, a 25 milligram B complex. That means 25 milligrams B1, B2, and B6, and folic acid, 500 micrograms, and vitamin B12, 500 micrograms a day. With choline and inositol, I would say at about 300 milligrams. Now that covers most of the important B complex, and that can help you. All right. And again, on a good, healthy plant-based diet, you've got a lot of choline. Soybeans, Brussels sprouts, all the nut family are rich in helping boost your choline. And that way it keeps your brain healthier longer. And I think all of us who have friends or family members who are in their 60s and 70s, and now because of COVID, we're seeing an increase in long COVID and dementia, aging of the brain. It's going rapidly in individuals. Now, there is a cancer that's very serious. It's called melanoma. And the University of East Finland and Kuopio University found that vitamin D is linked to reduced skin cancer risk. That's good news. Just consider all the people who simply get too much sun at one time. I mean, I never, even when I was younger, I never saw the purpose of laying on the sand and just baking like you're an egg, right? What's the point of that? And then you get the burn, and then you get some brown, and that's very dangerous. That burn can later lead to cancer. In fact, down here in Florida, skin cancer is it's epidemic. I mean, you'll start looking at people's hands and arms and neck and their face, and you see what happened when they didn't protect themselves or they got too much direct sun exposure. When I work out every day, I work out in trunks, running shorts, and a long shirt, no matter what the time of the year. Why? Because that shirt has a sun-blocking element in it. So it reduces your exposure to the sun by 50%. Also, their gloves are the same material, lightweight gloves, so it protects your hands and arms. I suggest if you live in places that have a lot of sun all the time, California, Nevada, for example, Texas, and Florida especially, you want to protect your skin from the sun. But this new study finds that the regular use of vitamin D is associated with lower rates of melanoma skin cancer. And that's important. So the University of Eastern Finland and the hospital there, University Hospital, they looked at adults and determined by dermatologists to be at high risk of skin cancer, such as melanoma, as well as squamous cell carcinoma and basal cell carcinoma. And vitamin D helped lessen that by a substantial margin. You don't need a lot of vitamin D unless you have the flu or cold or your viral infection. Then yeah, you need that high level of what we call 25 hydroxy vitamin D3, or just simple vitamin D3. I would suggest on a maintenance basis, probably in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 units a day. But if you're around people who are sick, if you're taking care of someone that has got a flu or cold, then you could up that to 5,000 units a day. And if you start to get sick, hopefully at that point, you're in the hands of a holistic therapist, a doctor or holistic nurse who can guide you. Then that goes up much higher. Don't self-medicate, but the amount of vitamin D3 that I would suggest people take if they have COVID at the very beginning, very high doses. My protocols are on GaryNull.com to help guide you. From University of Arkansas, new research further gives the case that exercising promotes youthfulness. Now, I've been an athlete my whole life, and everyone was athletic when I grew up. You had some people who were kind of nerdish, and they were always reading or doing something with their brain. The rest of us were doing something with our body. And sports was a big deal in a small town. Do you remember that film a long time ago with Jeff Bridges? Where he's in a small Texas town, and The Last Picture Show was the title of it. Well, many of us grew up with that small town way of living, where you had to show that you deserve respect. It didn't come unless you showed it, and you tended to do things that were important for your community. In my hometown, there was no YMCA; it closed, and so there was no place for the younger people to go and work out. And so we got a wealthy woman in town. I was very nervous. I went up to her house. She was, now whether she was the original Tugboat Annie, but everyone called her Tugboat Annie. Her name was Miss Harris. And she had the big house in our town. And she was the person who gave the most money for all the different projects. And so I knocked on her door and I said that, could you help us? She said, well, how so? I said, we don't have a boys club and we don't have the money to, buy anything. And she said, what do you need? I said, well, if you could buy us a building or a big house, we'd fix it up and we'd put all the equipment in that we could do. She said, okay. The whole thing took 5 minutes, literally. I'm like, 16 years old, 17 years old. And so she says, go get, she called a broker and a broker found a place on 6th Street. I actually have a clip in my scrapbook of myself and some others, and the newspaper, Parkersburg Daily News, says, these high school students just created the first boys club in town down on this street. House probably wasn't very expensive, but it was kind of her to do that. And then we had a place to go and exercise. Then we also had a gym and a garage. When you don't have a lot of money, you create ways of making something happen on the low economic end. So we just cleared out a garage, brought in the weights, and that's where we go to pump iron, keep ourselves in shape. But exercise was crucial. And here's a funny little thing. I don't know if any of you had this when you were growing up, but no one had a last name, or they were only called by their last name, like Null, or they never said Gary. For some reason, I can never once in my life heard anyone call me Gary. It was Gary, like G-A-R, or G. My producer for 13 years, Adria Eismeyer. I'm sure many of you remember her. She put all those, she produced not only the radio show on WMCA and before that on Balkan Echo Studios up on 96th Street from 1967 through 1971, then WMCA, and then later on BAI. Anyhow, all those retreats upstate at Grossinger's, 14 of them, Concord, about 7 of them, the Homowac, the Granite, she made all that happen. In any case, I grew up in a small town, as many people watching right now have grown up in similar circumstances. Even if you grew up in Manhattan or in New Jersey, in one of the towns or in one of the neighborhoods, you still relate to the people in your neighborhood. There's certain ethics, there's certain etiquette, there's certain ways of dealing with people. And when I was growing up, exercise and sports were very important. Not just watching sports, but participating in it, because we didn't have a whole lot to do. We didn't have, we just like American Graffiti, where everyone drives around at night looking for the very people they were in class with all day, and somehow think, oh, they're over this Fat Boy or Shoney's or one of the big boys, one of the hamburger joints. In any case, it's just part of the ritual of growing up. And it was innocent, it was fun. But being an athlete meant that you were trying to get as in healthy shape as you could. And I believe that part of the reason was because you saw your parents and your aunts and uncles and your grandparents, and they were not in good shape most of the time. I didn't see morbid obesity, and I didn't see a lot of obesity, but I saw people who simply tried to measure their diet so that they didn't overeat, because that was also something, that people pride themselves, being so-called trim, but that we didn't have a healthy diet. Even in the summertime, it'd be rare that we get some fresh blackberries, and you'd have to go out and pick them because we didn't have farmers markets, and the Kroger's and the other big stores didn't carry fresh, locally grown produce. And because my family lived in a little house in the city and also shared a space in a country home, we got to go out and pick wild berries. And that was a lot of fun. And it was tasty. I just remember how different a berry tasted when you picked it versus when you bought it. Because if you bought it, it might have been a week or 10 days since it was harvested. And picking peaches and cherries, and those were wonderful times if you had the chance to experience that. But also there was something that was never spoken about, but it was something that was obvious. I never saw anyone getting healthier the older they became. No one. And to the contrary, 35 was middle-aged, 35 middle-aged. As a result, once a person hit post-college or post-high school, that was it. I never saw them exercise after that. I mean, in the summertime, they might belong to a softball game, but you didn't see people out there running. I never. In fact, my group never ran. We lifted weights. We didn't lift weights for bodybuilding. That we didn't do. We lifted weights for powerlifting, meaning building strength. And I'm glad I did it, because that strength then has helped me maintain my health now. In fact, when I got to New York City, I was a strong 236 pounds, all muscle. And there's some earlier photographs, my daughter and I in Riverside Park, and you see the size of the legs, and I could deadlift almost 500 pounds. So, but once you're past that, once you leave town, then it's up to you to find out what exercise you can do, how often you should do them. And we didn't have the exercise science then. And so we didn't have a lot of good science. We certainly had no good nutrition science. It was terrible. It came from home economics teachers. Remember those? And they would tell you to eat 3 portions of meat a day, 3 portions of dairy a day, 3 portions of bread a day, or your carbohydrates. No one talked about sugar being bad or salt raising your high blood pressure. The big thing at the time was margarine. Margarine will help protect your heart, where lard, which was pig fat mainly, that's what people used in everything. Everything. I remember my mom would put a big roast in the oven and just put a lot of pig fat. I would watch it. There was cans of lard, a gallon cans. She would scoop out like 3, like, a death scoop of lard, and then put it clear around the beef, and then she'd massage it, and then put some vegetables in for me and some potatoes in for me, and then we go to church. And then 3 hours later, we come back, and the beef would be, perfect for them to eat. And I would get a plate or a bowl of the potatoes and everything else. Of course, when something is cooked for 3 hours, you don't know what's what. I had no idea what real broccoli was versus string beans, because everything just kind of went mushed together, and it tasted like that. And the only flavor we had was salt and pepper. That was it. No seasonings. And because, again, that wasn't the thing at that time. It had been at one time in American history up through the 1930s. Then everything became modernized. The TV dinner, remember that? Remember the little aluminum trays? You sit up and watching Ted Mack's Amateur Hour or Sid Caesar or one of those programs, or Ed Sullivan. And then you pop into the oven, the microwave oven, that little container, and you take the lid off, and there's your tasteless food. You get your meat dish, your potatoes with gravy and some vegetable. That's how we ate. We're lucky any of us made it to 30. It was like rat food, poison. It was terrible. But we didn't have honest nutrition science. In fact, I won a debate on WMCA. In fact, he agreed to debate me. Barry Farber was going to act as the moderator of a debate between myself and the top so-called nutrition authority in America from Harvard. And he didn't show up. He was playing Tiz, said he couldn't be bothered. So Barry, when we were told at the last moment he wasn't showing up, he just challenged me as a devil's advocate. And I said, well, here's a list of all the companies that sponsor this man at Harvard. Here's who gives all the money to all these nutrition departments at universities. And I went down all the sugar makers, all the cereal companies, all the soft drink companies. I said, so when he answers a question, is he answering as a person or as a spokesperson? There's a big difference. And I asked him many times. I did about somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 debates during a 20-year period from about 1967 to about 1985. And then nobody would debate anymore. As I've asked Anthony Fauci to debate, wouldn't debate, and others. In any case, we had zero healthy dieting in America at that time. Even the people who were in the health field had no background in health. They were the most unhealthy people I've ever met in my life. Sorry, as an aside, but I went to one meeting in Las Vegas at a national health conference, and I was one of the 12 speakers over a 3-day period, and I was one of the last, and I'm listening to all these people, and all they're talking about is their area of they control. Well, this guy's the high-protein diet. And so when I ask people for their background, did any of them have a background in nutrition or in, let's say, dietetics? The answer was no. And the PhD who made sure you called him doctor on television would go on television smoking a cigarette and drinking coffee with sugar in it. And he was a so-called health expert. Now, he wasn't a health expert in anything. He had a PhD from New York University in public relations, I believe it was. But no one knew that. I did because I did a little research. I never will forget the time that he wanted to have a meeting with me. And Clinton Miller, the head of the National Health Federation, I'm a young kid, right? I'm in my early 20s, and I'm meeting the so-called, the top health guru in all of America. And we go in this little restaurant. I ordered a salad. He's got this meat and white bread and all this crap. I didn't say anything. And he says, "Kid," he said, "you got to get on board." He said, "Otherwise, you're going to have a very short career. On radio, come and go. I'm on WOR, for dozens of years." And he said, "So you're going to have a very short career unless you become a part of what we're trying to do." And I said, "Well, sir, I'd rather just be on my own. Thank you. Because I don't see any healthy people in the health movement. I don't see any good advice in the health movement. I see books that are bestsellers selling millions of copies, but every single recipe in that book is a disease-producing recipe. I can't abide by that. I'm sorry." He says, "Well, then appreciate your short career. Your one-book wonder." Gets up and leaves. Yeah. 47 million books later sold. And I've doubled his time on the air. And I'm thinking, wow, what a fraud. The entire health movement. And that's why I have nothing to do with it. You may not be aware of that. I don't go to their conferences. I want nothing to do with them. And I haven't since that day in Las Vegas when I just saw it was just greed, stupidity. I say that simply because today we do have legitimate science, mainstream science. Here's the irony. Some of the best ways in the world to live a longer life and a healthier life are just go to PubMed and type in vitamin C as therapeutic benefits and safety range and therapeutic range, because what the actual science in the peer-reviewed literature showing how much vitamin C you need dwarfs what you're being told to. I mean, if you really want to have a functional nutritional-based diet, then you have to concentrate upon foods that are high nutrient dense, meaning they got a lot of phytonutrients, a lot of antioxidants, and that can work in your body. And also vitamin D deficiency, vitamin C deficiency, vitamin E deficiency, B complex deficiency, protein deficiency. And as you get older, what happens? You eat less protein. Why? Well, because frequently digestion is difficult the older you get. And people continue to worsen that digestion by overeating when they do eat and drinking coffee after a meal, which you should never do because it's highly anabolic. And if coffee were created for the first time today, it would be banned. That's the reality. And I only deal in reality because I am a scientist. I am a nutritionist. I am a dietitian. I'm a clinician. I've counseled tens of thousands of people. I've done over 55 clinical studies. And yet the information that I would share with you is the information that never seems to reach the average person. Instead, it's fad diet, miracle cures. Take this one product and you're going to be young forever, have an erection for the next 7 days. In some respects, we're no better than when I came into this field in 1967. In other ways, we are, except we don't have models of health. We have the guys who are on the steroids or pumping. We have some senior citizens that, hey, look at them. They're actually out there walking. Isn't that great? And they're 50 years old. How good is that? Oh, they're only out there walking because they no longer have the pain because of these 17 medications they're taking, with side effects being everything from death to death, and even self-embalming if you take this one particular form of aspirin. You don't have to worry about going to a funeral home. You just are self-embalmed. Jesus, man. When I look at the world we're in today, and I think how easy and simple and non-complicated the truth is, and how the truth actually works. Never confuse the complexity of a problem with the simplicity of its solution. So stop eating pro-inflammatory foods. Stop eating all animal. If it has a face or a heartbeat, don't eat it. If it comes from nature, make sure it's not overprocessed and stripped of its nutrients. If you're hungry, don't eat till you're full, because then you're overeating. If you're eating something because it's going to make you feel good, it's bad for you, because it means you're getting dopamine hits from that sugar or that fried food or that pizza or the flavor in food giving you the special mouthfeel, which is the fat. The one thing you don't need is more fat. I mean, do you ever see someone who's just really wolfing it down and they're 300 pounds? What exactly are they feeding? It's not the body's needs. We're overfed and undernourished. We're overtaught and underaware. We are overprocessed to where we expect things to be done for us instead of doing it for ourselves, especially homework and research. Just want to show that, because what we should all be doing now that I never saw an adult except my uncle. Myron, he was a referee in high school basketball. So for that period of the year, he'd be running up and down the court. Of course, he still smoked 3-pack of cigarettes a day, and there was no irony to that. And they would overeat at meals. None of those people lived a long life. Not one. A woman just died yesterday at 117. She was the oldest living person that we know of in the world. There have been people who've lived longer than that, but we're not interested in what they did. Now, what if that one person who lived had taken the proper supplements? What if she had exercised her whole life? What if she had stayed away from harmful foods? What if she had been around loving people? I'm assuming that some of these things, especially the meaning in life, the purpose of life, she was a nun, and therefore her mission in life in sacrifice and service is very important. When was the last time the average American sacrificed anything, and for what purpose? So when you start breaking down the problem and you're honest about it and you stay neutral and you don't add any of your political biases to it, you see it for what it is. So I'm suggesting everyone right now, I don't care if you have terminal cancer. In fact, if you have terminal cancer, it's really important for you to exercise, because high oxygen kills cancer cells. We're doing too much sitting. We're not exercising all the different components of our body, and we should. That's what the University of Arkansas found, that if you want to promote youthfulness, exercise more. This was published in the Journal of Physiology. And it's interesting because when I got into Central Park, there'd be Sunday mornings when I'd be running around the park early, and maybe other people come out later, but I could see only 2 or 3 people in all of Central Park doing a lap around 6 miles. And later you could see 20,000 people in races. And it's different today, and I'm glad it's different. And we have Pilates classes today, and we have yoga today, and we have exercise today. But it shouldn't be because you can build big, muscles. You don't go from being flabby and overweight to, being able to count your abs. What you do is you get to a place where you're not overstressing your muscular system. You're taking the right amount of protein, especially if you're over the age of 40, because that's when you start to lose your human growth hormone. And that's promoting muscle going on in the body, the protoplasm. And we're not using, let's say, the comfort zone, and we shouldn't. So if you want to live a longer life, exercise every day. All right? And based upon your own body and what you're dealing with, take your time. Don't rush it. But you've got to use weighted exercises for the resistance, and you got to do aerobic exercises today. Both. And I suggest starting by trying to reach 10,000 steps a day. That's not a lot. It's under 3 miles. And that's just the minimum I suggest you do. Try to stay between 15 and 20,000, and suddenly you're going to have no belly. You're going to have less body mass index. You're going to have more muscle, strength, endurance, stamina. So that's what I suggest. Everything, including the stem cells, will be younger, longer. All right? And this is real science. And yet we all have to get through that part of life that isn't supported by good science or good common sense. And it's like the person that graduates from college and says, hooray, I never have to read a book again. Well, unless there's one that condensed into about 4 paragraphs. And that's even a stretch. Let's read 2 paragraphs. Summarize Moby Dick in 2 paragraphs. That's all I need. No. But that's where we're at today. People stop reading important literature after college or high school if they don't go to college. And we should be reading more, not less. Also, exploiting the synergy of nutraceuticals for cancer prevention and treatment research suggests that free radicals generate the way of prematurely aging the body. More free radicals you have, the faster you age. Two new things have been shown to bring that back to help you. Resveratrol, R-E-S-V-E-R-A-T-R-O-L, and copper. It can help ameliorate various diseases by inactivating cell-free, what is called chromatin particles. And that's important. That's a brand new study. And this is from the Tata, T-A-T-A, Memorial Center in India. Chromatin, C-H-R-O-M-A-T-I-N, comprises a complex mixture of DNA and proteins that form like structural bases of chromosomes in the cellular nuclei. And when cells die, they release cell-free chromatin particles and into the circulatory system. In 1996, evidence for tumor-derived DNA circulating in the blood of cancer patients was first reported. This evidence caught the interest of a doctor who is a professor emeritus and the chair in translational research at the Memorial Center in Mumbai, India. And he found that when you're using two nutrients, copper, maybe 2 milligrams, low amount, but resveratrol, that makes a huge difference. You can break up this way that the body eliminates its dead tissue, and you can actually have the cells live a longer life. That's, it's that simple. And you want healthy cells. All right? Healthy food going in, healthy cells. Healthy liquids going in, healthy cells. And by the way, one last thing. This is from Shanghai Tong University of Medicine. Deep meditation may alter your gut microbiome for better health. What's this mean in lay language? Taking 10 to 20 minutes a day, sitting quietly, being aware of your presence, but no distractions, no cell phones, no television, no radio, and just being present. That's known as deep meditation. Now, when you practice that for several years, it can help to regulate the gut bacteria and potentially lower the risk of physical and mental ill health. That's the study that was published in the open access journal, General Psychiatry. Remember, the gut microbes found in a group of Tibetan Buddhist monks differed substantially from those of their secular neighbors who didn't meditate and have been linked to a lower risk of anxiety and depression and cardiovascular disease. Yeah, that's how good those bacteria are. That's why having low sodium sauerkraut and miso, low sodium miso, and tempeh and tofu, or just yogurt and non-dairy yogurt, you want those good probiotics in your body. They create, in effect, what is known as the second brain. One's up here in the cranium, the other's down here in the gut. And if you meditate, you enhance your immune system, you enhance hormonal signaling, you reduce stress response, and the vagus nerve, the main component of the parasympathetic nervous system, which oversees an array of crucial bodily functions, and the significance of the group and specimen designed in these deep thinking Tibetan monks can serve as a representative of some deeper meditations. It's in one of the films I have. And this gentleman was introduced to me, and I believe by Mitchell Raven, I think. It was a long time ago. And I met him, and we were filming this segment, and he does like a gymnast. He gets on his forearm from his hand to his elbow, and his whole body goes straight out. That's hard to do, even for a gymnast. To support straight your whole body with just your forearm. And he's having a conversation while he's doing this. And it was a long conversation. And he was over 90 years of age when he did this. He practiced deep meditation. And so there's a lot we can learn from other cultures and other people and other traditions that can enhance our well-being. That's the latest on health and healing. I'm Gary Null. Always go to GaryNull.com, look at the articles. My My 30-year archivist, Sharon Pride, said yesterday, well, you're approaching 1,000 articles, Gary. You're up around 947 articles published. So you've got a lot of reading, just my own, plus other articles and film clips. It's there. Take advantage of it. All right. Oh, and by the way, if you have kidney disease, curcumin and boswellia, Boswellia, shows promise, according to Baylor University. We've got a lot of people who have chronic kidney disease. An article in the current Journal of Complementary and Integrative Medicine reports the findings of researchers at Baylor College or Baylor University of a reduction in the marker of inflammation among chronic kidney disease patients given a combination of curcumin and boswellia. All right. So look at all the different resources and tools that are available to you, but then use them, manifest them. Back in a moment. Please stay with us.
Are you tired of closed-minded programming? Well, look no further than PRN.Live, the home for progressive voices.